The ones with the thorns in them.
Oh, the good ones.
Hey, we should be.
All about good chairs out in the corners.
We're live right now.
No,
No.
not exactly yet. Oh, yeah.
We're live, we're good.
All right. Love to do the gavel. We just want to welcome everybody to our city council meeting, January 10th, 2023. Today we have Mayor Monson is out of town. He asked me to cover for him today. He is at a medical appointment with his son, so he couldn't be here. We have Councilmember Ewald, Gasser, Grover, and Nelson here as well. We will start with a prayer of thought. David's going to offer that today.
Our dear, kind and gracious Father in heaven, we are grateful for the opportunity that we have to come here together, discuss the needs of the city, and pray that thy spirit will guide and direct our elected officials as they discuss these items and determine what direction is best for the community. And we're grateful for the moisture that we've been receiving lately, and pray that it may continue, and pray that the mayor will travel with his family back safely to town. And these things we send our thanks and requests for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Congratulations to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, David. Sweet. We just need an approval of the consent agenda for today and the meeting minutes from the last council meeting and the special session. So when you guys are ready, I'll take a motion.
Make a motion to choose the consent agenda minutes from December 13th and 21st. Second.
All right. No, I think it's supposed to be right. Am I supposed to be writing this down? Or do you write it down? Okay. All right. We have
Motion to approve.
oh my goodness, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, now's the time. If you guys have any conflicts of interest on the agenda today, to just let us know.
I have a conflict with resolution 0110-2023-1. The FPL contract addendum, since I am currently a hangar tenant. I should probably abstain from voting on hangar rates.
Sounds good, thank you. Anyone else?
As a shareholder water user, I could possibly have a irrigation water conflict.
Yeah, thank you. I think you can vote if you'd like to. It's up to you. As long as you declare.
That particular one's just a discussion item.
All right, is there anyone in the public? Now at the time we have public input for our meetings. This is your one and only chance that you get in the meeting to share any thoughts that you want to share with City Council, and you have 3 minutes to do so. Anyone present? Okay, let's move on to reports then. The mayor did not tell me if he had any reports to make tonight, so I assume he does not. Anyone from council have any reports?
The airport advisory board did have a meeting last what was it? Last Thursday to discuss the addendum to the FBO contract. So more to come on that, I'm sure.
Was that your first meeting?
That was our second.
Second meeting? Nice. Good. Anyone else? All right. David, it's your turn for information reports.
Yes. Oh, here. Oh, yeah, so reports, right now, I don't have anything outside of what's on in the packet there, if there's any questions. One question I did have for the council is, our first meeting in February is actually on Valentine's Day. I didn't know if you wanted to suspend that, or if you wanted to continue to hold that. Just, maybe I can shoot an email, or you guys can decide tonight and let me know, but.
Okay, leaving it.
Well, who, now, come on.
I was gonna say, I'm not that brave.
I'm with Kellen.
I don't know.
I might be in trouble.
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking. I've already got plans. I didn't really look, but
yeah,
I'll
so,
be here if I.
So we would
Yeah,
just
dude.
cancel that whole meeting?
yeah, we cancel that meeting if we can't get a quorum, so, why
Move
don't
it to another day.
Yeah, we moved
This
this
far
date.
in advance.
we could be. Let me just look at.
We'll say either. Either.
It's the date, say the 15th.
Wednesdays, there's usually a lot of church stuff going on, but.
I mean,
I
yeah,
don't know if I can say
it's
that actually.
Teams open, but I'm just checking. As far as work calendars are concerned, so your personal calendars, if Wednesday's open.
Wait, January 24th, we won't have a meeting?
No, the first meeting in February.
Oh. Yes, I got you.
So we could switch it to Wednesday if you'd like, and you just have to public notice that.
I'm fine with something.
Wednesday for the 15th.
Wednesday?
Believe me.
Good idea.
Perfect. Okay, all right, that's all I have unless there's any questions on staff reports.
All right, Kim, you are up for financial reports.
The payables are there in the packet. Do you have any specific questions regarding any of those? Well, it's anything I don't have it memory, but
The tables is in, I just see the check register. Was it just the check register that we're looking at?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. All right, good. I was looking for your other tables that you have.
that will be next meeting. I'll have that for you. It'll be midway through the year report.
What are the flowers for?
For passing, I can't remember. Oh, one of our staff members, not with the flowers, but we've got gift cards for a staff member who, a family member passed away, and then the flowers, I think, were for another staff member, or a family member passed away.
Any more questions on the check register, the financial report? Okay, we'll move on to the recreation report. David Kilmer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I believe you have your the rec report in front of you. I did want to point out one thing on the very bottom. It just shows our total reported entries for the year, and our year-to-date recorded entries was 50,808 visits. Now, though, that only counts those that have an actual card that are swiping, doesn't count like the one-day pay-ins or people showing up for league night like tonight where they're coming to watch basketball. So that's a lot of traffic coming in and out of that facility, which I think is good, which is an increase from last year by 7,789 recorded visits. So
Excellent.
it's a busy place. So just remember that when I come begging. Come budgets. Do you have any questions on the rec report?
You know, just eat the pickleball course and you can't find somebody to put together.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often.
But we're working on that, so.
Maybe no interest in playing.
Well,
There's interest.
A lot of contractors are just out, and so.
Put it out for design.
Yeah,
To maybe help.
We're gonna put it out for design and get a engineer design to put in. We think that's been the major issue. There's people that want to do the work that they don't want to do or have the time to design it. So
So if we design it, then.
So if we have to have it designed, how much is the additional cost?
we budgeted for that. And for this exact reason, so.
Any questions for David?
I think it looks excellent. Definitely coming along.
I think so.
Yep, that's the other
Are
thing.
people playing pickleball in there still? Are they? Okay.
On a daily basis, every morning, we usually have a group come, kind of a slow time in the morning, 9 o'clock, like after a lot of the people who are working have gone. When we very first open our doors, it's really, really busy. People trying to get work out before work. And usually right after that crowd leaves, our pickleballers come in and set up a couple nets and do that. So it's a pretty good time to do it, but, and that group is growing all the time too, so.
Okay. Questions? All right, thanks, David.
Thank you. Thanks.
So this next report, Chief Spillman couldn't be here, so he told me that if you have any questions on his report, just let me know and I can. Maybe this here.
I like that he got the responses on there, all the different types of responses and hours.
Yeah.
Question.
Any questions on the fire report? Okay, Chief Bradford.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. December was a little bit slower, which was super nice for us. We were kept busy with juvenile problems. Other than that, we're as is. We've got our that report attached. If you want to look at that, if you have any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I've had at least 2 different residents kind of talk to me a little bit about, they've seen, in their words, they've seen like a noticeable increase in, patrol, and just from the guys being visible, I guess. And they just wanted me to tell you that, they appreciate it. Keep up the good work, basically. Whoever it was is making an impression with them, so it's good.
Has there been any complaints of any kids getting harassed on scooters? Have you had that complaint
No,
reported to you?
we're getting our kids riding with skateboards down on the top of Main Street to the forward intersection and interfering with the flow of traffic and scaring bus drivers.
Yeah.
So,
I ran over a skateboard one night.
Was the kid still on it? or-
No, he fell off of it and I was trying to slow down and it went right under, the truck hit it. I thought I'd killed somebody, broke his board right in half though.
I'm afraid we can't, we've been telling them to stay off the road, but it's not working.
This was still when Pop was in going and he came out of there and lost his board into the street.
One may have learned.
Any questions for Chief Bradford?
No, just thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyway, sorry, Chief, I'll talk to you about that. Sorry, Chief, I'll talk to you about that. I just was wondering if anyone else had reported anything. I just have 2 incidences, so I thought if it was a consistent thing, but I will call 911. All right. I'll get price. It'll be great. All right, Terry, water. Water.
We have the December last water report of the year. Should be in your packet for 2022. I don't know if there are any questions. I put in the notes there. We had a pretty good jump, like right after the end of the year and before I put the water report together.
You know what the snow tell is today?
I haven't looked today, but I would guess that we didn't get very much up there.
34 inches and 9.5 inches of water.
Wow.
So
The
we got a half
water's up
inch.
2.5 inches then since I looked at it last. That's been 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, the community's pretty excited about the snowpack that we have up there. Frame of reference, we usually get pretty good runoff if we can get at least 12 inches of snow water equivalent. They're stored before the runoff begins. Thinking back to 2019, I believe we had about 26 inches of water in the snowpack. And, you know, and that was a really good runoff year, so we've got a ways to go, but you know, we're on a really good start to at least have a decent runoff. So average goes around that 12-inch mark. Any other questions on water?
So we need 3 more inches?
Yeah.
Okay,
And typically we'll get some of our best snowpack on a normal year, February and March.
right.
Some of those April rains bring a lot of water too.
It always worries me that we don't have enough storage for times like this. So
We don't.
we don't, you know. Okay,
We
I
need
mean,
number
it's
5.
great. It's a good problem. You do.
Any other questions?
Look,
Anything
let's
else?
see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're right back up, Joe.
I didn't prep my agenda, so.
You are back.
Cool. We've been waiting kind of for some updates on the carbon-free power project. We have Mason Baker joining us remotely. Mason is the general manager for UAMPS. Maybe Dave will get him pulled up here.
Yeah, he's in the corner. Do you not want me to screen share yet?
No, let's maybe let him introduce himself, if you can make him big, and then there we go. We can see you, Mason.
All right, am I coming through okay?
Yes.
Okay, well, good evening, everyone. Apologize I couldn't be there in person, but happy to be with you all this evening to talk through with Terry leading an update on where we are on the carbon-free power project and any other questions that you guys may have related to the general state of the power sector in the West. Happy to answer any of those questions. But again, thanks for the opportunity to be with you all.
Thank you.
We'll start the presentation then, Mason, and
And I'm sorry, did you introduce Mason? I might have missed it. Can you,
Yes.
can you just introduce him one more time?
yes, so Mason is the general manager for UAMPS. You know, he just started in that position this year, January 1. Up until then, I'm not sure how many years, Mason, but he's been general counsel for UAMPS.
Okay,
That was his prior position, so.
thank you.
It's quite a bit of experience in the public power industry. Okay, so are you gonna run the slides for me, Dave? Perfect. This picture, you saw the same picture behind Mason there. This is kind of a mock-up of what the carbon-free power project will look like. You see kind of the entrance and the admin buildings there on the left. And then all the way to the right, you can see, you know, the power's leaving to some, to the transmission system coming out of there. We've been waiting. We knew that we were going to get the class 3 project cost estimate completed in fourth quarter 22. That has happened. UAMPS has received the class 3 project cost estimate. UAMPS and the owner's engineers have evaluated the cost estimate and updated the financial model. The updated costs from the class 3 PCE, I guess just to update you on a class 3 PCE is that accuracy range of -20 + 30. And that's kind of an industry standard for these type of projects and cost estimates. The completion of the cost estimate triggered a number of key activities. The economic competitive test, which the inputs from the cost estimate go in, and the output is the levelized cost of energy or the cost of that. Of what we'd expect to pay for the power. Also an amendment to the development cost reimbursement agreement. We refer to that as the DICRA, but that's the reimbursement that comes by contract through Department of Energy and also NuScale as our partner. And then a revised budget of plan and finance. So let's move to the next slide. And if you have any questions as we go, let's just address those. So the cost estimate, I've kind of indicated to council that we anticipated that those costs would go up. I think we all have a pretty good handle on what's been going on from an economic standpoint in our country over the last couple of years. And, I don't know that we need to go through all of these, but most of the cost increase to the project has not been due to project development. The scope of work hasn't really changed. We've refined those costs and got a better number pinned down on what it's going to take to build the project, but they haven't changed tremendously. We are seeing a lot of increases in inflationary increases with respect to steel. Carbon steel piping has increased 106%. Copper and cable 32%. And there's just been a lot of increases that way. And then the other big increase in the cost of this is a capital heavy project. And so interest rates really are hitting us on that. And we're seeing 200 basis points since July of 2020. So if you remember our target price of $58 per megawatt hour in 2020, that was where we wanted to be at or below that, and then kind of the economic world's blown up a little bit since 2020. Can we go to the next slide, David? Thank you. So with the cost estimate, we put that into the ECT, and as I previously reported, and what we anticipated is that we would get in a price above that $58 per megawatt hour target range. And this we did include the benefits from the Inflation Reduction Act. And so that is kind of newer money after COVID that has been, and Mason, maybe you could interject a little bit just about the Inflation Reduction Act.
Sure, happy to. And we'll see it in a few slides as far as its actual benefit to the economics of the project. But the Inflation Reduction Act, as you all are likely aware, was passed into law this past summer, the summer of 2022. And within it, there are investment tax credits and production tax credits for power generation facilities, in particular ones that are zero carbon emitting. And the carbon-free power project will qualify for these tax credits. We have done some modeling to assess the value to assume in our economic model for the investment tax credit. And we've also worked with Fluor, the engine constructor for the project, because there's certain ways that you can qualify for the benefit of the tax credit. An example of that is making sure that you have a sufficient amount of domestic content that's going into the project. So that's a qualification that must be met. It's just one example of what we've been looking at to really get a better understanding of how we'll qualify for that tax credit and what assumptions we should be making. I will say that there's guidance that will come out in 2023 that will better inform the assumptions that we're making. So in 2023, we plan to take another look at those assumptions for the investment tax credit. Happy to answer any questions about the investment tax credit. I can get into a fair amount of detail if you'd like, but it's a very significant benefit for the project, as you'll see here in a slide or two.
Thank you, Mason. I knew that he could address that a little bit better than I could.
So the new cost estimate takes into account the credits from the
Yeah, I mean, UAMP's best guess on what those criteria is. Those are considered in there. So, you know, we haven't passed the ECT. That price has been exceeded. So as a result, UAMPS may withdraw from the project and be reimbursed for most of the out-of-pocket expenses. And that's one of the pathways forward. Can we move to the next slide, David? Okay, kind of talk about some of the other pathways forward. The reimbursement agreement, the DICRA. So in order to keep the project moving forward, UAMPS has been working hard and along with NuScale and the other project partners to find a path forward that will work. And part of that is establishing a new ECT target and that is reasonable, attainable, but will be difficult to get there most likely. And so this is $89 per megawatt hour and $2022. So, and it retains an obligation for 100% reimbursement on the CFPP termination for failure of an ECT test at the class 2 project cost estimate. So we completed the class 3 project estimate, fourth quarter of 22. The class 2 estimate, I believe that's more of a minus 15 plus 20%. So it'll be refined quite a little bit, still more from where we are on class 3. Mason, can you remind me what the due date is for the class 2 roughly?
It will be late fall of 23.
Okay, so probably around fourth quarter again, you know, a year following, we'll get that next level cost estimate. And, you know, for us, you know, in the carbon-free power project to move forward, you know, we've got to feel pretty comfortable that, you know, if we can't hit this price target, that we have that reimbursement. And so with the amendment to the reimbursement agreement, we've been able to secure that. And
So the ECT was 55, correct?
58.
It was 58.
it was
target.
recently, yeah, historically, it was lower than 58. And that was way back. And what was it, 54 here
55,
a couple of years ago, Mason?
The target was 55, and then when we changed the configuration to go from a 12 module facility to a 6 module facility, we agreed to increase it to $58. One item that's important to note is the $58 is in 2020 dollars, and I know that can get confusing. This $89 is in $22, and if you were to bring up the 58 to $22, that would actually be somewhere in the mid 70s, around $75. It's just another example of inflation has been incredible the last 2 years.
So we're saying if we stay in, we're agreeing to the new target rate not to go above $89 in 2022 dollars.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, you know, the other real challenge that we've had in the project has been subscription. We've talked about that several times, and that still tends to be the case. And so as another part of the amendment to the DICRA, we've been able to negotiate. NuScale has agreed to give 100% reimbursement, you know, for failure to gain the subscription. And so the amount of subscription that we've agreed to on that is 80%. And if we can't reach 80% subscription, you know, by late fourth quarter or just first part of 2024, then that would also trigger the reimbursement from the DICRA, you know, if UAMPS decides to terminate the project for lack of subscription.
What are other entities doing? Are they just not interested in the project? Or they're scared or pricing?
Mason, would you like, could you hear that question?
Yes, so, we have a number of other entities that we've been in discussions with and will continue to be in discussions during the course of the next year. We have had a lot of folks just sitting and watching, which can be frustrating. The one thing that is a change in the environment that is important, I believe, to make note of is, unfortunately, we've been seeing a dramatic increase into the wholesale electric markets in the West. This is largely driven by an increase in natural gas. The natural gas and the price of power in the West are highly correlated. We expect that that's going to continue as far as an increase in pricing. And frankly, the $89 as the Western market is evolving is looking like it's not such bad pricing. And that is a very big change from where we were the last couple of years.
So some of the fence setters might get back in?
Yep, and we have been, we've got the UAMPS membership pool. There's interest there. There's external interest to UAMPS. There is potential for more of a sort of independent power producer to come in and sell output out of the project because they believe a zero carbon emitting project like this has a tremendous amount of value. So we're engaging in diligence with those types of entities, but just accenting the importance of having the 100% reimbursement for the failure to get to that 80% subscription. In working with all the participating members, this was a key must-have. So from my perspective, this was a critical amendment to get this protection for us as we move forward in the event that we're not able to secure that additional subscription to that amount.
Thank you.
So the Dicker Amendment, based on significant changes in the past 2 years with the inflation, the interest rates, the gas pricing, we feel like that we've arrived at a pretty good agreement at the $89 for 2022 dollars. Can we move to the next slide, David? Thank you. So that takes us to the revised budget plan of finance. So with the change in the class 3 cost estimate, UAMPS has put together this revised budget and plan to go forward. It includes the costs from the class 3 estimate, it also the DOE award profile that we've been working under. It includes the transmission upgrades that will be, project requirement in order to bring the power out of the project and use that. And then also the Inflation Reduction Act, which, as Mason explained, was passed, last summer and is a big benefit to the project. So if you look up in the top, we have 1A, phase 1A, and that's the combined licensing agreement development, the class 3 cost estimate. And you can see over on the far right, that takes us through next month of this calendar year. So that's the phase that we're working in now. Going forward to January of next year would be phase 1B. And so that would be continued COLA development and the development of the class 2 cost estimate. And you see the totals there. Once we hit January of 24 and actually submit the combined operating and licensing application to the NRC, you can see that the project costs significantly ramp up. And, we'll be moving forward with the project at that point. And then the construction phase obviously is the biggest number. And so we're looking at a project cost total of over 9 billion. And then on the project, so then item 2, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mason, this is the cost sharing funds that come from DOE and that bring our costs back down. And the total there, just under 8 billion is the project costs after the DOE cost share from the DOE award. And then the bottom is total project cost after all of the cost share from DOE and after the IRA benefits. And so, do you have anything to add to that, Mason?
I think you covered it well, Terry. I would just say again, I mean, you can see that there's a significant benefit associated with the investment tax credit from the Inflation Reduction Act. So again, we'll be taking a look at the guidance when it comes out, verifying it, and that could change the LCOE result when we run the economic competitiveness test next fall. And that's something that we'd be looking at very closely to make sure that we've got those assumptions as right as they can be based on the guidance.
Perfect. Questions on that? Next slide, please, Lucas. Okay, the next phase. So the budget for the next project phase fully funds execution of the critical path activities, including the COLA development, the site-specific engineering, the Class 2 cost estimate, and then the nuclear power module long lead material. So the COLA development is on schedule. I think it's SDA, but anyway, just last month in December, the standard design application was submitted to the NRC, and that is the design from NuScale for the technology end of the project. The nuclear power modules and that type of thing. So that has been sent to NRC and in their hands now. The combined operating and licensing agreement is more of the site specific, the construction of the actual facility in the actual location, and the other items, the cooling and.
Where is this site?
So this site, just as a reminder, maybe some of you haven't heard or don't remember, this is the Idaho National Laboratory site up there near Idaho Falls. And so that's a DOE owned property. And we have an agreement with them to use that property. And so, and then the long lead material, let's talk about that a little bit. In order to keep the project moving on schedule, on time, there's some long lead material that NuScale needs to get started on in order to fabricate the nuclear power modules. These are, pressure vessels, some different materials that way. And so we could probably just go to the next slide, David. And as we transition into that, well, I guess this one doesn't have anything. Maybe just talk a little more to the long lead material. To keep it moving, NuScale needs to begin work on material acquisition and production of some of those items. And so we have an agreement there. They're working with Department of Energy to make sure, to minimize their risk. Obviously, you don't want to build a whole bunch of big, expensive pressure vessels and types of that nature if you can't keep it or you can't utilize it, if this project were to not continue. And so that's kind of what that long lead material is. And NuScale is looking for some risk mitigation through DOE. And really, we're involved in that as a partner, but it's not a different cost. Does that adequately address the long lead material, Mason?
Yes. There's an ongoing negotiation with DOE on the long lead material cost. And if this project were to terminate, NuScale would like to be able to reutilize that long lead material at a different project. So that's an ongoing discussion with DOE right now that should be resolved by the end of no later than the end of February this year.
So let's talk a little bit about the exposure. Well, I mean, the net project cost would be the total costs minus the DOE cost share. And then the exposure after the economic competitive test or subscription failure. So if we get to the end of 2023, just transitioning into 24, and the project fails either based on subscription, we can't reach the 80%, or if the ECT shows a levelized cost of energy that's higher than the $89 in 2022 dollars, that would be a failure. And so the exposure, the exposure now, we have reached an ECT failure, and the project management committee could choose to terminate the project. And that exposure is $4.7 million, coming up here at the end of February. If we go forward and give it one more year to try and get the subscription in to a level that we're comfortable with, the exposure will change to 5.4 million. So
That's for UAMPS,
yes,
UAMPS exposure.
for the project, for the participants in the carbon-free power project that you.
Okay, got it.
And so, we're just a little over 2%. So our net exposure would, go up $14,000 or something. And I think that that risk is worth it on a project like this. We need the energy, the carbon-free dispatchable energy, certainly. And let's go to the next slide, David. Okay, so this is talking a little bit about schedule. January of 24, we've talked about, that's when we would submit the combined operating license application to the NRC. 2026 would begin construction, and then 2029 in December, we would take for the first power from one module. And then by the end of 2030, all 6 modules would be in operation. And so we'd be able to get our full project entitlement by November of 2030. We are on schedule. We have some really good project management folks working on that and running it along. And we, short of subscription, and then the economic challenges of the project, everything's going really well.
Maybe we've discussed this before, but I can't remember if we have, but what I hope happens is that, I hope they meet their subscription rate, but what I hope happens is you get to the construction phase and everybody's going to want to jump on board. Because that means all the licensing and the regulations or all those hoops are jumped through, I assume, at that point. So is there a difference between us being in now and people who want to get in 2026?
Well, Mason, you could probably answer that question a little better than I. I think most folks will have to get in by January of 24, at least 80%, because we can't move forward if they don't. Would you like to address that, Mason? Were you able to hear Cheryl's question?
I would concur with your answer, Terry. Really the timeline for them these additional participants to get into the project to hit the 80% of the total subscription is the end of, or by January of 2024. And as Terry pointed out earlier, after January of 2024, the project cost goes up significantly. So that is why we want to get those additional participants in the project. It is a tight time frame. We're going to be very aggressive in allocating more resources towards that effort over the next year because it is a very aggressive timeline.
I guess my thought was that, let's say we don't hit the 80% subscription rate, we're at 50 and you have, we all decide to stay in. Is there a benefit for us to being in now?
Well, yes.
And I'm sure that's what, other people would ask the same question.
I mean, there's really not gonna be an option for us to get in after, and the fact that we're already in, there would be no benefit to be out.
I agree with that.
And
Yeah.
Mason, we do have some new council members, on board that haven't been with us all the way through. Councilmember Grover was probably with us when we started, or not even then, and then off and now back.
There's 3 of us here that.
Yeah, so in order for, we've talked a lot about the reimbursement agreement. For that to be, we have to meet certain requirements, which we have currently met based on the ECT failure. And then the UAMPS Project Management Committee needs to elect, by a majority presumably, to terminate the project. And then that would trigger, we would get the reimbursement. And then, Blanding City still has some cost share, even after all the DOE reimbursement, and then the reimbursement from NewScale based on the digger. We do have some financial risk that way. Well, we have some financial obligation, I guess would be the proper term there. Moving forward for Blanding, and I would expect that we would bring a resolution for council to pass in 2 weeks at our January 24th meeting on how we plan to proceed. And there's going to be several options there. We could choose to withdraw from the project. And what if we were to do that, just Blanding City, then we would be responsible for our portion of the costs on the project up until now, because NewScale wouldn't be reimbursing because the project, if the project management committee for the carbon-free power project chooses to move forward and just Blanding exits. And so there's a cost associated with that. And then and we can go over all that. I didn't put that in slides or anything. The other option for a resolution would be to continue and move forward and see if we can get the subscription and see if we can meet this the new price target of $89 per megawatt hour. And we would need to do that by resolution. And the other option, we could reduce entitlement, which would change, the cost that we're responsible for to some extent. We haven't really oversubscribed. And so I'm not sure, that I would recommend that we reduce entitlement at this point. I think the amount that we're at, as we've lost San Juan. That's shut down now, and we're buying quite a bit of power on the open market. We were able to lock in a 5-year power purchase agreement that just started. And so that'll take us through to 2026 or 7, I think 2027, which is incredible based on the market pricing we're seeing right now. I mean, it really is saving our bacon. And we don't know what that'll look like in 27, when we need to, and this power won't be online until 2029. And so, our future is probably some market exposure in some way or another. Hopefully we can get a little bit of a long-term power purchase agreement and do that. And so, I guess one thing we're looking for tonight is just maybe a little bit of a feel of what path does the council want to take, and what kind of, which direction are we headed? That decision doesn't have to be made, but we would like to prepare a resolution that could be adopted at our next meeting. And
You said the financial exposure for next February or next January is about 15,000 if we were to pull out of this deal.
Okay, so it gets pretty complicated. So if we choose now to withdraw from the project, our exposure is going to be around 573,000. If the the carbon-free power project, project management committee decides to terminate the project based on the current ECT failure, our number would be around 100,000. And if we go forward for another year and we terminate the project based on an ECT failure, our exposure there is about $116,000. Now, I need to verify a little bit, but my understanding is that we paid just over $50,000 that we contributed into the project early on, and then about 2018, we quit participating financially, and it's being, debt financed. So,
Do you want to tell them too, though, I forgot what you called it,
the member margin.
yeah,
We have a member margin account at UAMPS, that just tracks all the plus and minuses on the, the month-to-month power bills that we run with them. And we have an amount over $130,000 in our member margin account right now with UAMPS. And we can get them to cut that check back to Blanding. We can save it for, when we see a big market fluctuation like we've seen, a couple of years ago in February, we had that polar vortex and our power bill got really high for 1 month. And so we've chosen to leave some of that money there in that member margin account. And so if the project management committee chooses to terminate the project based on an ECT failure now, the one we currently have with this off-ramp period, then, we would just get out with that small exposure, some of the costs that we have there. And if we wait and give this project another year and a chance to succeed, which is what I would recommend, that exposure or that, we're going to spend another $14,000 trying to get there. And then, I guess there's the chance that we could get, we could still withdraw next year. Let's say they have 85% subscription and it's moving forward and we decide that project's not the right project for us. We're going to have quite a little bit more. It's going to be the pushing 600,000 and then plus whatever we incur over the next year to exit the project.
can I just add, so
Yes.
essentially, they cancel the project, we have the funds to cover that cost. If we decide to pull out, we're.
We don't have the funds.
Yeah, well, we do in our electric and our power fund savings, but can pay a lot more. But yes, that's how I would couch it as well. So it's better to stay in, and if they decide to pull the plug, then we're. in a
And the
much better
ship's not
position.
sinking yet.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thanks, David. Mason, do you have any other comments based on that?
No, Terry, I don't. I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Hey,
How are other UAMP members feeling?
I know how their member reps, feel kind of in general. I would say, is it fair to say, Mason, that probably most of the member reps in the project are somewhat optimistic as far as moving forward this next year?
Yes, I think that's fair. And, again, I think, a big contributing factor is the wholesale price of electricity and how it's been spiking going back to Q3 of 22 and even November and December. It's changed fundamentally from where it has been. And that's, the $89 is certainly a large price increase, but put in context, the market price that we were paying in December, and that's typically a low price time of year. But there's some interesting factors at play. You've got lower coal deliveries. Coal's deliveries has become an issue, and then there was a very large spike in natural gas pricing. But the market pricing that we experienced in December was an average at $275 a megawatt hour. So it is a fundamentally different market than what we've grown used to over the last 10 years.
You know, we've been seeing just over the last year, you know, our power bill is probably averaging high 40s, low 50s per megawatt. Historically, we've seen, you know, lower 34, 35. September, we had that kind of record heat right at the first. Market prices went crazy. You know, and San Juan was still running. It ended up running until the end of September, and we still, I think our average was high 80s for that month. And so, and you know, with the 5-year market pricing that we were able to lock in, that's helped us tremendously. So, you know, we're just exposed to some of these high prices that Mason's referring to, you know, just on some of the peak loads here and there. And you know, I think the power market pricing has been really volatile. It's changing, you know, with our current leadership in Washington, with just the way the market's moving, you know, it's not going to go lower a lot, you know, on average long term, just with decarbonization. You know, the coal supply has been horrible for the UAMPS members, just the ones I talked to at board meeting and that are taking a lot of power from Hunter or from IPP. You know, a lot of that power goes to Southern California from IPP, but you know, just even between coal mine fire at the Lila Canyon mine and trains, they can't get the coal out there. A lot of challenges.
What percentage of our power do you think we'd be getting from this?
Well, based on our load, it would be about half. Yeah. You know, we expect to see some growth with electrification, you know, of the transportation industry, you know, being more rural. I think that we'll see that slower than people in urban centers for sure, but we'll see some growth that way. Natural gas is only going to get harder and harder, you know, with big carbon footprint and the politics that we're seeing throughout the nation on that. And, you know, I don't know how long Landing can stay at 0.7% growth rate, but we're kind of a hidden gem, and I don't know how long we're going to stay hidden, but I've been here almost 19 years and our growth rate's been 0.7 the whole time. And it just feels like that won't last forever. And so, you know, I think we can expect to see our power demand just go up.
Well, I mean, I think we obviously, it sounds like UAMPS is going to recommend that we stay in, just given the summary down here. I think we need to stay in. I think when we need to take a serious look at it is there's no more off ramps though, right? Like the off ramps are done. So if we ever at this point forward decide to,
Yeah, we'll have an
we would
off-ramp
have to,
next year.
off ramp? Okay.
That's correct, right, Mason?
Yes, there would be an off ramp in January of 2024, and then there would be another ramp in 2026 at the decision to go into full construction. So there are 2 more off ramps still.
But there's no off ramp without paying the 500 and something
Unless
$1,000.
cancels it or they don't.
Unless they don't meet these things in the new DRCA. Okay. So just to me, it makes sense to continue to move forward and evaluate. But as you have been, you've been giving us such great updates. I feel like we're informed, and I appreciate that so much, because I think this is important for us, but as a city. But really evaluate it in December and January of next year as well.
So if this project moves forward and we're locked in, will we still have an option if cheaper energy becomes available to purchase cheaper energy from another source? Or are we going to be contractually obligated to
yeah, we'll own this power and it'll be ours. And so, you know, I mean, we could sell this at a loss and buy cheaper, but that wouldn't make sense either. So, yeah, I mean, you're right. If we read the markets wrong and all of a sudden power is much cheaper than what we developed this power at, yeah, we would own this.
But we could also keep this and
Yeah, but it's
buy
only-
power at a cheaper rate on the market. or-
But it's only 50% of our projected usage, so we still have to come up with some power from somewhere.
Right.
And it could be at a higher cost, so.
Is there somewhere to, that I could go and research, and educate myself a little better on this
Yes,
project?
yeah, I can get you some information.
Okay.
And we can sit down and talk about it, and then if you have any specific questions, you're probably not coming up with, I mean, I know this is a lot all at once, but if you have any questions for Mason, always here, he's a great resource. And UAMPS is always available, we can reach out to them with questions anytime if there's questions that I can't answer.
In fact, maybe why don't we send a little synopsis and some info, like links or whatever to the council as a whole, if they want to refer to some things.
Yeah, I can
That'd be helpful.
pull some stuff together.
Well, thank you, Mason. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. I think it's my.
Thanks for
well,
having me.
first time
I'll-
meeting him.
Try to make it down in person next time. I agree with Terry. It is a gem down there.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we are, scheduled for a public hearing. I just didn't know if there's, if we wanted to move up any of the business items, there's people here for any of the business items. I guess we can't. The public hearing has to be at this point.
Yeah, that,
Because
that's
of the
where it's
agenda.
at in the agenda.
Okay.
And it shouldn't be too long, yeah.
Okay. I just have to read a long statement, so.
But we need the motion first.
Yeah, no, yeah, can,
I'll
we
make a
do-
motion, we go.
Okay.
Hearing for the CDBG funds. I'll second it.
oh, Elder, I'm going my brain. Councilmember Nelson, and sorry, was it Grover? And Grover had the second. All in favor to enter public hearing, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are now in public hearing for the CDBG funds recreation capital projects. And I have a statement that I need to read for the public and for the council members. Blanding City now will hold the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, Small Cities Program public hearing on January 10th at 2023 at 50 West 100 South, Blanding, Utah at 8 p.m. Blanding City is eligible to apply to the Utah Department of Workforce Services for funding under the CDBG Small Cities Program, a federally funded program administered by the state of Utah Housing and Community Development Division. Blanding City is eligible to apply for CDBG funding provided Blanding City meets the applicable program requirements. The purpose of the public hearing is to provide citizens with pertinent information about the community development block grant program and to allow for discussion of possible applications. This public hearing will cover eligible activities, program requirements, and expected funding allocations in the region. The Southeastern Utah Association of Local Government is expected to receive $778,000 for this year's funding cycle. Blanding City was awarded $69,762 in the 2022 cycle for upcoming pickleball courts. The CDBG program can fund a broad range of activities, including but not limited to construction of public works and facilities, water and sewer lines, fire stations, acquisition of real property, and provision of public services such as food banks or homeless shelters. In the event that Blanding City chooses to apply for CDBG funding, a second public hearing will be held at a later time to discuss the project. Further information can be obtained by contacting David Palmer at 435-678-9977. In compliance with the American Disabilities Act, individuals needing special accommodations, including auxiliary communication aids and services, during this hearing should have notified David Palmer at 1013 South 300 West, Blanding, Utah, at least 3 days prior to the hearing. So after that, does council have any comments or suggestions for CDB grant funding purposes? Pratt, is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
with council and then we'll get on the staff.
Well. so
Council, and then we'll move on to staff.
What did it say it could be used for again? Sorry.
So, public works facilities, water and sewer lines, fire stations, acquisition of real property, and provision of public services such as food banks or homeless shelters. But obviously we used it for recreation purposes.
Could this funding be used as part of our improvements to get a dedicated water line for the fire system or wellness center?
It can't be used for any paid facilities. So we were hoping last year that would be
That's what we tried
the
last
main
year.
purpose of it. So where any facility that you have to pay to use, it becomes ineligible for that. The majority of those funds are technically for lower income activities or that benefit lower income communities. So where it's being where the facility you have to pay for it would have to like subsidize certain things. Where it's already subsidized, we don't subsidize.
We're already
the subsidies,
subsidizing.
so.
Exactly. Yeah.
So could it be used for infield dirt?
It cannot be used for infill dirt. We also looked at that last year because the majority of the field time is you have to pay to be a participant in our rec league. So
The high school field doesn't.
That's part
But
of
the
it.
majority of the time spent on those fields are for paid.
So it can be used for anything on those fields.
yep. So you know, like the shade structures, like where the pickleball courts are free. It could be, say there's a sewer line in town that we wanted to run, and this happened to pop up, you know, things like that where it's doesn't cost someone.
So you said it could be used for shade structures?
Yeah,
Oh, we've got several sewer lines, sewer projects that need to be upgraded, worked on in town.
it's gotta be like one big one.
So a project that we did a few years back, a small sewer project, we needed to upgrade a neighborhood. Because there is a low income component, we had to do a salary survey for the neighborhood. And, you know, make sure that the demographic there was correct. And so, you know, Brett did a lot of those interviews and whatnot, but so sometimes on like, you know, like an east side sewer where it benefits a whole section of the community. It might be difficult to meet that low income requirement.
Then if you're fine, I'll make one more comment. But part of this too is things that we've been planning on doing as well. We're rewarded for doing what we're planning on doing as well, like just creating a new project. Not saying that's what we're doing for a sewer line or something, but creating something out of the blue doesn't get rewarded as highly in this process. They like when the city has been planning and, you know, taking steps to do the project, whatever that project is. So keep that in mind.
So a shade structure, how about at the Central Park here? Where the pickleball, the pavilion area that we had planned.
If
we
it's
had
a
to
free
cancel it.
pavilion,
Yeah, the pavilion's an opportunity, and I know David has a couple ideas as well that he's got that I don't know as much about on, but yeah, pavilion's an option.
So because kids pay to play on those fields, even though they don't pay to attend the games, you don't pay to attend.
a shade structure might be different because anyone from the public could come sit in the stands and watch the games for free. Whereas to participate on the field in the games and the programs, those are paid programs.
Have you already looked into that? Have you already asked about that specifically? It seems
We have
odd.
gotten the dirt at last year.
Yeah.
during that time.
Okay.
So that's why there's some distinction with that.
Anything else from council? Ideas? All right, let's hear what city staff has to say. That'd be great.
There's David Palmer, staff member in Atlantic City. I'm also speaking on behalf of some of our citizens. I'm glad to hear you were talking about shade structures or safety shade structures because they provide double use, providing safety and shade. Since we've talked about this before, a number of our citizens have asked, well, what happened to that? Is that something, a possibility for the future? So I'm here to hope that that particular project of the safety shade structures at Centennial Park would be considered for this. So
So are you talking to the baseball fields?
in Centennial Park.
And one of the
And that
keys,
would be at what we're talking about is on each field, they each have two areas where the stands are the bleachers. Thank you. So it would actually be a total of 8, 2 on every field.
yeah, and so one of the key distinctions too about the shade structures is they provide a mechanism for safety for foul balls and things like that. And that would meet requirements for the CDBG funding as safety shade structures.
So that's-
I also, have we thought about also adding at the Central Park here for the tennis courts, which I know is also a safety issue because we had tennis players passing out this year during the tennis games, which is more of a high school issue, but they're the city courts. So, have we thought about adding that to this, or could it all be done as one project?
No,
No,
I don't believe that.
one at a time.
They're very specific.
But that is an
Very-
idea that
very,
can
very
be
specific.
proposed by council or the community or staff if that's an idea we want to put on the
And
list.
we
So, yeah, that's
so to clarify, we can double check. And then the one other thing with this is that we will have this funding available next year as well. So
Yeah, we're very fortunate for that.
Yeah, so if there's a couple of these projects that qualify, and that's the purpose of this public hearing is to talk about a variety of projects that could potentially qualify. And then as we move forward, we can identify ones that we would like to apply for. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, in that pavilion, the smaller one at the tennis courts may be something the city may have the financial means to do in the future once we get the wellness center done. So it makes sense maybe to go to look at the baseball parks.
Absolutely.
We've been talking
discussed
about
some of
that
those
for a
things
long time,
Yeah,
never had the funds.
in some of our open meetings here and stuff. So
Yeah,
that's definitely something we want to consider for.
great.
That's all I had to say for the public hearing portion. So thanks.
Thank you. Do I need to ask for public? Anyone from the
Yeah.
public have any ideas or comments for the CDBG program?
Someone baseball program reach out to me, they can be here, but they don't really qualify, I don't think, but they want a fire hose to wet down the baseball field.
Okay.
And they want access to the shed so they get the Kubota to drag the field regularly more often and get the fields watered earlier in the season. But I don't,
Access to our community has really anything.
no, but I'm just reading you what he said. So.
Okay.
he's doing what he was asked. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I don't know why a water line wouldn't be, because is something that can be used on all the fields.
I don't know if you need
All
a
the
new water
time.
line, he just wants a fire hose.
Oh, just the hose? No.
They're already there.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Come talk to me personally.
Yeah, I will.
Make things happen. Absolutely.
I don't think they're asking a whole lot.
So we probably do need to bring the dirt up again at a different meeting, but. Anything else? Okay, I'll take a motion to re-enter a regular council meeting.
Make a motion to re-enter. Second.
Councilmember Gasser and Ewald. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we are now back in regular council meeting. And The next item on the agenda open for discussion is the recapture raw water sales.
And, Councilmember Bowers here, Monson is on. Just so you're aware.
Oh, good.
He is on. He may be in and out of reception.
Okay,
Okay, well, let me ask you. We have the business item for we have people here for both the discussion item and the business item. We can move up the business item, then go into discussion, or just keep the order as is. Or just maintain the order as
if there's
is.
people here for both, yeah, let's just maintain the order as is.
Okay. All right, great. Mayor, council, I'm gonna give you just a very brief synopsis because we've kind of talked about this in the past. With our raw water sales, we have a current policy for the upper ditch. So when we sell raw water, we sell it at 75% of the cost of culinary water. What we discovered or what we've known is that that policy is not consistent with raw water that we have in recapture reservoir. And historically, we have sold raw water to the mill. Now that's a contract that we took over from, I believe, who did we take that over from when we bought the bottom 800?
The Water Conservancy.
The Water Conservancy District. That contract expired, and since then we've just basically been doing it year to year at a flat rate cost. So the raw water sold out of recapture isn't subject to our drought year policy or basically that tiered policy. So during a drought year, if rates are up, they still get the same flat rate as what's been going on. And so we had some various discussion about it, and that's out of recapture. Now there's another situation that we kind of need to address as well. We do also raw water out of the upper ditch is 75% of culinary to every single entity, including the city, the school district, and others, except for some reason several years ago, and I wasn't here to explain all that justification, the city granted a flat rate raw water sale from the upper ditch at $175 an acre foot to the cemetery. So we kind of want to talk about both. If you turn to page 31, I have a table and I'll try to kind of briefly walk you through it and then let the council have a discussion on what your thoughts are on this approach. So you can see kind of going left to right. Let's start with that third column where you see upper ditch raw water, city and institutional rate. So the average rate of the raw water costs at 75% was about $630 per acre foot, and $630 is 75% would be $840 per acre foot on a culinary rate. Now, just keep in mind that those are just averages, estimations, so that this can be more easily understood. So say someone was to purchase 1 acre foot, that would be $630. Say, for example, the city or city parks or the school district were to buy 33 acre feet, it would cost $20,790. Now, by comparison, you look at the cemetery, they're paying $175 an acre foot, and that would cost them only $5,700. Now, if the city, the school district, the LDS church were to buy 150 acre feet, that would cost us $94,500. The mill purchasing raw water out of recapture right now is only paying $11,250. So here's where the recommendation is coming in place for a policy that's attached here. And if you as a council discuss and want us to go a different direction, like the direction, want to make small tweaks, let us know. But what I'm proposing, what we're proposing here is that the cemetery rate and should be paying what the other institutional entities in the city are paying at basically those same average rates. And so the cemetery rate would go to the same as everyone else paying out of upper ditch, because every single entity paying out of upper ditch for raw water pays 75% per city policy.
How much water does the cemetery use?
33 acre feet last year is what they used. Now, if you look at the school district and the city, for example, the school district used between 3 different lines. They used about that same amount. And they paid 18, they paid over $20,000 for that. The city it is in a similar fashion. So yeah, so there's that aspect of it. Then the raw water recapture, what I've done here is in this table, you can see right now they're just paying the flat rate year to year. What I wanted to do was make sure that any sale of water in the city from any part of our system is subject to the drought years by the tiered system. So if we're in an orange year, whoever's buying water from the city is paying an orange year rate, so to speak. And so, but some of the unique nature of recapture is there's not a lot of maintenance we have to do out there. Now, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be saving up capital for potential maintenance for whatever future the future may hold. But I felt like there was great points made that recapture is not the same as maintaining the upper ditch. And so what I did here in this table, I said, okay, well, we're doing the upper ditch raw water cell at 75% of culinary. What if we did 25% or 20%? And one of the things that I did here, right now, we only have the one customer of raw water at a recapture, but they're outside of city limits. But in thinking about the future and what may happen in the future, if we were to have another entity in the county that wanted to buy raw water from recapture and they're willing to build a line there, well, per our precedents, and we saw this situation with a different, or we saw this situation happen earlier, was when someone else wants to come purchase water from raw water from recapture, well, we've already set a precedence at the rate that we sell it at. And so the intent of this policy is to establish a consistent policy. So no matter who approaches us, and what we've proposed here is that we have a proposed rate for those outside of city limits and a proposed rate for those inside city limits. And I'll just end my explanation right there. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, it's your turn to kind of, I guess, discuss it as a council, pros and cons if you like. If you want us to just roll with this and bring it back the next council meeting, or if you want us to make little tweaks, that's kind of what we're looking for, advice and consent on how to move forward.
How does a cemetery fund their? How do they pay for everything?
Yes.
Sell plots
Just sell by selling plots
and taxes.
Jackson.
and taxes?
Jared Palmer's here and he's.
Yeah.
Those questions
So
for you.
if you want to have him speak to some.
I would like to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, I think that's fine. And I sent them this policy yesterday to review and let them know if they had any questions, they come chat with me. So.
Jared, you're welcome to come up, or you can stay sitting.
Well, I'm gonna see front and center.
Well, as they said, we receive taxes. And also from the sale of plots and from the sale and from when people are buried, there's a maintenance fee that's charged. And that's basically how we receive the money we have. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it seems fair that the cemetery pays what everybody else does, as long as we can afford it.
So a few years ago, when I started, I'm not sure what changed, but they did make the change to when just charging these guys a flat acre foot rate. I'm not sure. That happened about the same time I started with the city. And then what we do is, what we've done historically is we get together in March and they estimate what they're going to need for the summer, and then they prepay for it.
I guess if we quit watering the streets and the fields, we'll have more water.
There's as you guys probably know, we've expanded the sprinkler system to the north in the dirt fields out there. We are pretty much out of planted area to sell. So we either start digging in the dirt Or if, or we get water to plant more grass. Those are basically our options. So, just obviously that depends on what Mother Nature does, but it also depends on whether or not we can afford the water to keep going and doing what we're doing.
So this 33 acre feet is historically what you use every year.
We've used more than that in the past, but we've tried to, the way
Tried to conserve.
we tried to conserve and cut.
How much more ground is covered under the extended system?
Yeah, what's your total acreage and what's the percentage of that, right? So what you're looking for?
I don't know for sure, but I think another 4 or 5 acres. I haven't really sat down and put a pencil to it
That has sprinkling systems.
where we.
That's the additional.
That's the additional. I mean, as far as the whole cemetery goes, I couldn't really tell you.
I think you're around 30 acres out there altogether with where your shop and all of it, but maybe not that much.
You think that big?
The shop area, the part behind section 5,
12 acres.
there's 10 acres back there.
Okay.
And then we've also got ground between the furthest south road and the road going into
Chaco.
the Chaco.
Chaco, yeah.
So that strip of land there, we have that, it's obviously undeveloped, and then the 10 acres behind the shop, that's undeveloped. And so, what'd you say, 38?
I think there's around 30 acres that belongs to it.
Is it
This is probably
inside?
half of that, it's developed.
What determines the plot price?
Market value. I mean,
Okay, where are we? What is the plot price?
to be quite honest, I can't really tell you that. Melissa has all those, she deals with all the finances and all that kind of stuff, and I don't have that in my brain. It used to be.
That's the open and close $300. Is that right?
Yeah, it used to be a residential fee
Inside, then.
for
I mean, if
opening and
you're-
closing.
I didn't know
Anyway,
that.
I can't tell you all those off the top of my head. Melissa deals with all that, so. But I do know that. When did we change those fees? A year and a half ago, 2 years? Anyway, we went through, we made some phone calls, we talked to other cemeteries, kind of seeing what their rates were. And we were way lower than most people, and so we upped them ways. Part of the reason, and I still feel like sometimes maybe we at least need to up the non-resident fees, because we are so much cheaper than so many other places. People will look around and they'll say, I can't afford to be buried there, so I'm gonna go to Blanding because they're so much cheaper and they're filling up our land.
That's actually a common occurrence in other municipalities where they have that happen. Some municipalities will have actually stopped allowing
Well, I know
non-residents from,
the cemetery where my in-laws want to be interred has been closed for
yeah,
20 years.
right.
To non-residents.
No, closed. If you don't own the plot, you're not getting in there.
Right.
So can I just clarify this so is the cemetery considered inside city limits?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
Because it's our cemetery.
Well,
But
it's
this
a
says they would
cemetery
pay-
district, but, yeah.
They would pay less than they're paying now. And it says $168. They're now paying $175. Is that wrong?
No,
They
that
pay
you're looking at the
75% of the cost.
City, the cemetery is under upper ditch. Cemetery doesn't get raw water.
So
from
they would pay
recapture.
the 75%.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's why that's blacked out.
exactly.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Is it a
So
possibility
that's
to
a
get,
large increase.
Yeah.
Just-
is it a possibility to get recapture raw to the cemetery?
No.
No,
No.
and the cost to build that would
The
be,
only way would be
It's
is to be
about-
pumped and then have to have a new line and
it's about 3 times the cost of what they're paying right now. But that also means they're paying about a third of the cost of what everybody else is paying right now.
Yeah.
To
Look
put
at
it
it
in
both ways.
perspective, yeah.
But
So-
you also got
But
to
it's our
put it
city
into
tax
perspective
dollars.
that it's being funded by our tax dollars.
Same with blending cities,
Yeah, same thing. The Blanding City,
although
Parks are
we
all-
have the usage of our utility companies to pay probably some of that as well, or they don't. Same with the school, that comes from tax dollars, but that's a lot of that is
I mean, the recreation is paid out of the general fund.
from sales tax and property tax, where these guys just have property tax, right? That's the only tax funding that you get is property tax. So it is different than the school district or the city. I mean, because all of it's funded by taxes except for those minimal costs.
Yeah, that may be good, so.
I probably ought to declare that I do sit on the cemetery board. So just so you're aware of that, that's why I kind of know.
Can you absorb your rates going up by $40,000 a year? No, I mean, more than that,
Probably not.
$50,000-$60,000 a year without raising taxes?
No way.
It's not gonna increase 50 to
It's not-
60,000.
It's not 50%. It's
About 6,000, 20,000, and
Yeah.
they use the same amount of water.
Yeah,
Well, the rate's gone from $175 to $630. Oh, wait, so I see, okay, it'll be an
Yeah.
increase of 15,000, I
So-
see.
one thing to keep in mind though is the institutional rate essentially is. Well, with the exception of maybe the LDS Church, are all tax funded entities. So. That makes sense.
I mean,
So it's
I-
$15,000.
I guess to kind of answer that question. The only options we have really had, if we haven't been able to accomplish what we need to accomplish, is to ask for a raise in the taxes. And I don't think we've done that very much.
Or
Is it on city taxes?
Yeah. But
Or is it's on the county
It's
tax
on the
bill,
county.
which is where ours is.
Because they're a special service district. So they collect taxes
Well-
that way.
What we're saying, they're looking at $20,000, but if you're putting 10 more acres in grass,
yeah,
$20,000 is not gonna cover it. It's gonna go to 30 or 35, maybe even 40.
well, and truthfully, the idea is that maybe we won't put it all into grass at the moment. Just at least get a section of it to where we can have some room to sell. Because at this point, we've been, if you come and ask me to buy graves right now, I'm pretty much gonna tell you no. Because I have nothing to sell in the grass. But, I mean, we historically, we try and keep some that people can, if you don't have a plot and you have a family member die, then we have something that we can sell you. And we try to keep a little bit of that or that kind of thing. But, on a family basis, if somebody comes as a family and says, hey, I want to buy 5 plots, which is our limit for family, we don't really have that to sell right now. Because pretty much everything to the south in the old sections, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are sold. They're gone. There's nothing there to sell. And so everything we've got to sell is in those northern sections. And they're pretty much all gone, except some of the areas where we're trying to keep for those people that have a death and gotta have something now. So,
So not only that, but you're not gonna have revenue coming in from the sale of plots because you don't have any plots to sell.
that's right.
So it's gonna be tax dollars that are all gonna be paying for this water.
Well, not 100% because we do charge an opening closing fee and that maintenance fee. So,
Oh, there's an annual maintenance fee.
well,
No.
there's a maintenance fee for non-residents. Taxpayers don't pay the maintenance fee because they're considered paying it through their taxes, but yeah, just non-resident. Anyway.
So they are looking at as they grow into this new spot, we've been reaching out to see what other cities in the west are doing with their cemeteries because of the lack of water. And I spoke with somebody from the Ratio Extension who helped us out here out front, and he's supposed to be putting us in contact with a water specialist that could help us with what we can do with the cemetery to keep the water use down. I mean, what is Vegas doing? What is Phoenix doing? What's St. George doing? I mean, all these places. And so when I met with Melissa and Steve one day and Jared wasn't there that day, that was one thing that we talked about, was reaching out and seeing what others are doing because of the lack of water. I can say these guys, when we asked them to reduce their water use last year, they went down the 30% very willingly. Appreciate it.
I don't know that I want to go 75% on the cemetery district where it's something that we want to look good. It's something that,
You're gonna have
heaven
people,
forbid, you have to go up there, because I don't like to go up there.
What about the mill? Have we talked to anybody from the mill to get their thoughts?
Yeah, I sent it to the mill. They didn't reach back out to me, but they did reach out to Terry and just communicated that they feel like that we should just keep doing it how we have been doing it in not so many words. Is that a fair assessment? Which was what they had conveyed to me in the past, that they want to just keep doing it the way we're doing it. And quite frankly, the point of this discussion is because we can't keep doing it the way we've been doing it. And we're trying to find a way
is
to.
potential for a long-term contract with them still an option?
Yeah, we could with them, but you know, I would still recommend that we make sure that it is subject, that it creates consistency. The policy creates consistency, so if anybody wants to come in and purchase water, raw water from recapture, that we're doing it at a fair rate. And the thing of it is look, we're not making a lot of money by selling that water to the mill.
We're losing money.
In my opinion, yes. I mean, we have not recaptured, basically we haven't received the ROI we spent on that through sale of the excess raw water. Of course, there's other means, but my point is if we're going to sell the water, let's sell it at a rate that makes sense. It's going to help build capital. Otherwise, let's keep it. That's kind of my thought on it. Now, Terry's brought up some points that, you know, in years when we have excess water and we can't retain it all, right, then it doesn't matter if we kept that excess water.
How much did the mill pay to have that right to use that water, Terry?
How much do they pay?
How much money has the mill? When that, I know that reservoir was, they had some funds come in to help pay for that reservoir.
I don't know the history.
Now we took over the contract. Do you remember what year, Kim, about? So say they've been doing it, I'm just going to do some quick math. Because I know they had a 25-year contract and then it went year to year after the 25-year contract. So say 20, and we'll just use that 11,000 annually, say 25 years times 11,000. I'm just going to round the number. That means they've paid in 25 years almost $275,000, and we paid how much for the bottom 800 when we purchased that 1.4 million.
That was months ago, I can't remember.
So
How much have they paid in? Sorry. What's your estimate?
just if you get $11,000 over 25 years, it's 275,000. We paid 1.4 million for that bottom 800 acres.
What's the percentage they pay again?
They don't pay a percentage. They pay a
It's a pay
flat rate of
rate.
$75 per acre foot.
I do think the mill should pay more in yellow, orange, red years. To me, that's not unreasonable.
And
If we're asking our residents to pay more, they should pay more. In good years.
The water's gonna sit there if they don't buy it.
Right.
well, it also is lost to.
No, it's not lost. The city's water, it is not lost to evaporation. It sits below the irrigation company's water and it sits above the conservation pool and the conservancy district. It does not evaporate. It does not seep. That 800 acre feet is there.
So if some does, it's the water districts,
They have
whoever's
some.
above it,
The irrigation
the
company is above
irrigation
it.
company. Yeah.
Well, like this year, council member Grover, because it was below the top of our 800,
But it'll refill. It's the first to refill.
then we did lose all the evaporation.
Normal years, The city loses nothing.
So on that note, because we were below, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is we didn't even sell this year,
No,
right? And so anyways, so I don't know, it's an interesting dynamic. The philosophy of this proposal, and you can change it, that's why I showed 25%, 20%, but if you look, if they paid 25% of culinary, what they're paying is compared to the upper ditch, they're paying about a third of what upper ditch users pay for raw water. So a third of what the city parks pay or whatever. So, but we could adjust that. Now, administratively, I would say the bare minimum that I would recommend going is 10% of culinary costs just to cover administrative costs. But we think we should be bringing in or garnering more than 10%, because I'm not just thinking about the mill. I'm thinking about in the future, if there's other entities that come in and are willing to pay to have water piped over to purchase excess raw water, we need to be thinking long-term like that as well. So, and having a consistent policy, because the situation we were in, I can't remember when that happened. Was that this spring, where we sold some raw water from recapture and we sold it at the same rate? There was a huge uproar over that. And so I want to have
the uproar was that you sold the water, period.
exactly. And that's kind of the same scenario in my book, is we're selling our excess raw water to an entity, and we need to have a fair and consistent policy to whichever entities who are eligible to purchase that water and utilize it in a fashion that would be beneficial to the city. I want to make sure that there's a policy in place that would create that level of consistency.
Could you have a rate based on, so if they exceed so many, could you drop the percentage to like 15%?
So
You know, say 70 above 75 acre feet.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't done any kind of math to try and figure out what that would look like, but I mean, that's a possibility. I don't know, like, Terry, if you have a thought on that.
Typically, we tier our system, so the more you use, the higher the rate goes, not the lower.
Oh, yeah, that's true. You see that with other types of utilities, but water utilities to incentivize conservation. Yeah, that's
Right.
true. Sorry.
No, that makes sense.
Because we did talk about
Yeah, I
that
think we
early
did.
on.
I think
I
we
remember
did.
that, yeah.
I still think it's got to be more fair. It's got to be some kind of a standard, not, the cemetery we're charging, more for. The mill we're giving it, almost giving it
Different
away.
systems, different dollars to upkeep each system.
But the one,
One's the upper ditch, one's the.
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm just saying, it's just,
Oh,
but each, I think that's got to be figured into the big picture. I mean, you can't go through each, organization, like the school district, gets a break because they're using the upper ditch and this one's using the lower ditch. And I think it's just got to
There's
be,
only one entity on the lower ditch.
the mill.
No,
Mhm.
everybody else is on the upper system.
However,
Landing City only pays their shares for maintenance. If there's a problem on that line, Landing City doesn't pay it. The Water Conservancy
The
pays it and then charges,
we do have to pay our portion.
you pay your shares,
That's right.
just like every other user.
you're talking about recapture?
Uh-huh.
So the only caveat that I would say, or I don't know if caveat's the right word, but based on kind of what Councilmember Gosser is saying, the upper ditch, we have multiple reservoirs, right? And we don't
Well, yeah.
treat, if someone's getting raw water out of number 3 versus number 4, we don't treat that rate differently. Now, I do think there is arguments to say recapture should be treated differently to some regard. And that's why I think this is more of a hybrid of what we're proposing, is saying, hey, yeah, 75% doesn't make as much sense, but 25%, or if you want to go 20 or 15, I can type right now and tell you exactly what those costs would be. But I felt like, especially for an entity outside of city limits, 25%, a third of the cost of what other raw water users from the upper ditch are getting was.
Well, we still have the loan. Am I remembering right? So we still owe on what we owe on recapture.
No, I think we've got that paid in full.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
Well, there's still gotta be something a little bit more than,
You
Just-
pay for the shares.
what if somebody else moves in and, you know, we just redo it all then, or?
Well, for them to be able to buy water cheaper than the acre foot coming out for everybody else is not right. They ought to at least pay the acre foot price for water coming out of that pipe. What's it gonna cost? Whatever our share cost is, maybe we should tack that onto it instead of saying a flat rate on this 150 acre or this 800 acre feet. To put a price on it, we can say, okay, we're gonna charge you what we're getting charged for our maintenance on that line. It's just a thought,
Well, and as along those lines.
because that
too-
price is not always the same.
Yeah, and along those lines too, I mean, if we want to, retain that water and to pump it, to be treated, et cetera, I mean, that's $60-70 an acre foot for us. So we're essentially selling it to them at our cost. So we're not even adding much cost onto what we're selling of what it would cost us to produce it. And that's why I was trying to figure out a rate that seemed fair, and that would be subject to drought years, et cetera.
I actually like the percentage. I think that's a good idea because then it fluctuates based upon how much residents are paying, how much the water rate is. So I actually like the percentage idea. I just, we've all been here 3 years where that mill has struggled and we need that mill here. We need it to operate. We need it to
They
be
do have their
successful.
own wells, and the reason why they purchase our water, and they've told me this flat out, is because it's
It's cheap,
cheaper to buy
right.
water from us than to pump their own
So on the
wells.
years where we have excess water, we want that income coming to us. We want that.
Sure.
We don't
yeah.
want them to draw it out of their, we want them to pay us. We don't want them to draw
Although
it
the
out of their
argument
wells.
that I would make with that is that it's really not, I mean, $11,000 isn't a ton of money, and that's what I was saying before is like, it's not really building a huge capital, but yes, I think it's better to get the revenues than to not. But then how do you work that in with creating a consistent policy? That's what really couldn't combine.
So
both
if
of
we
those.
increase our rates to, I don't know, 10% or 15% or whatever, they likely will cut their usage of our water because they'll use their own wells. because
Essentially,
our
they
water
have
rates
to
are
make
high.
that business decision themselves, and we've tried kind of asking them about that and
Mhm.
getting information, but I don't think you ever got information back on that.
I mean, they like to recapture water. It's cleaner. It's better for them to process, at least some of their processes. They prefer it.
And
And they're
again,
not paying maintenance on the well.
but here's the main thing that I want to get back to is when I'm talking about consistency, is it's bad practice to create a policy based on one entity. If you're going to create a policy, base it on anybody that could come and want to enact that same policy. And that's what we're trying to do here. We cannot create a policy just around the mill or just around the cemetery. That's why we're here, is we've got to create a consistent policy. Now, if you want to say, let's do it at 15%, we can do that. Or you want to say, don't use a percentage. The main thing I'm looking for is consistent policy. Even if you said, well, let's do the cemetery cheaper and let's make it the same for everyone else. Consistent policy. Now, these numbers that we've crunched and looked at, this is what I'm recommending in creating consistent policy. But you as the policymakers can say.
So you're recommending taking the cemetery to the 75% like everyone else is.
Mhm. And then recommending that outside recapture raw water sales at 25%. And then if sometime in the future, there's an in-city raw water use out of recapture, we do it at 20%.
I think the percentages look pretty good, pretty fair. But that's a big jump just to make overnight. I mean, what about the possibility of just, having a.
We could phase it over a 3-year period where we say the first year it's at 15, and then 20, and then 25. I mean, I don't have any problem with that.
I agree. I think a good policy would address, anybody that came in and I think this looks pretty good. I think that's probably my biggest recommendation is see if we could just phase it.
I don't know how we would do that necessarily with the mill. That makes sense. Because anyone that would want to jump in right now would be subject to that phasing over 3 years. The cemetery is a little bit difficult because those other entities could come in and say, well, I want that rate until they are brought up to the 75%. Does that make sense? So I don't know that the phasing would work as effectively unless the other entities are in support of that and saying, yeah, we're good with that. But as far as consistency is concerned, I don't know that we can necessarily do that.
But I think in your policy, you would write that any new entities applying for raw water at a recapture would start at this rate.
Mhm.
The mill would work to that rate over a 3 or 5 year period, whatever we decide, something like that. Is that what you meant?
Well,
Yeah.
what we could do is I would almost we have our policy and we
Right.
do one-off agreement
For
with
the-
the mill stating that they'll work them over a 3-year period or something.
With the goal that they're the same in the end.
Because they may not want to even do that. They may say, we're good with this price. They may say, screw it, we're just gonna use our wells.
own water.
Yeah, they could go either way. So I would say we should pass a policy and then negotiate that phasing if we want to do phasing with them individually. And maybe we could do that with the cemetery or something like that too. So that it doesn't affect the policy
Does the
itself.
cemetery have a well?
3 of them actually. None of them are
Functioning.
functioning.
They're all dried out or they just split?
I don't know. I have no experience with any of them. I just know they're there.
Okay.
None of them have worked since we got here.
Okay.
And we haven't spent money.
So I guess I'm just looking for advice and consent on how council you want me to bring back a policy.
I'm kind of agreeing with Chris. I think that a 3-year phase would be helpful for the mill. But I don't know what they're gonna say about that either.
Yeah.
Um,
And I can sit down, so after I get policy direction from you on this, I can sit down with the mill separately and talk about how we could work out a contract that would phase it.
Can you look at something that would compare what our shared water costs out of that reservoir
That's something we can.
and see
Yeah, I mean,
a
so
percentage on that share, what we pay for our other shared water out of recapture?
Yeah, so, I mean, I can shoot you some numbers right off the top of my head. We have a fall assessment and a spring assessment. And so if the assessment usually stays about the same, and then that was changed based on the allocation per 1,000 shares. So on a
Right.
normal year, they'd allocate 10 acre feet per 1,000. And, the number that sticks in my head is about 32.50 an acre foot. So if they only allocate, on a year where there's a little bit of water, but not a lot, you might see an allocation of 2 acre feet per 1,000, and then you'd probably be looking, I want to say that 160 range per acre foot, $160 an acre foot. If you're comparing it to irrigation assessments. And
Well, I know my assessment bill was way more than the cemetery districts.
Yeah.
So actually on that note, if it ranges between 32.50 an acre foot and 160 an acre foot, and then you add our cost of $70 to pump it, I mean, at the minimum, it would be $100 an acre foot. And at the most, it would be, 70 plus 60.
I think that's information we have to have.
So that puts us
We
right
can't sell
about
it to them at a loss.
25% at the high. That makes sense. So.
Can we get that confirmed? That estimated number?
Yeah, it would depend a little bit how you run it. There's some years we get no
Like this
allocation
year.
like last year, and we still pay the assessment, so that would drive your average cost up.
So Terry has said the number ranges between about that $32 and $160.
Let me work with Kim a little bit on that and kind of see what our historical assessments and allocations have been and try and come up with some different numbers.
I know the most we've ever had is 14. And that was in 95.
So council, what I can do actually is I could bring this policy back with those numbers. And then what I can do is I can have a policy ready for you to pass, but I can give you what it would be at the cost of 25%, 15%, 10%, et cetera, so that you can say, okay, pass this policy with that percentage if you want. So then we don't have to have a whole nother discussion item and bring it back again, but we could do that. We could have a whole nother discussion. with them.
Let's do that.
Sounds good.
I'd rather just move it along because
My initial thought is that the rates are a little high here, but when I hear that, oh, the city also cannot lose money on our water. And so I think we need that information to decide where these rates, for me personally, to determine where these rates should be. Maybe they're right on and maybe they're too low. I don't know, but we need to definitely know that. So
Right.
that'd be great. They seem a little high and I still feel like the cemetery is a little bit different situation because they are funded by tax dollars. And
Yeah, I think you're saying it's a tax increase if you're raising the rates. I'm a little bit concerned of, can they afford that increase? I don't know.
their water will be going up to $15,000 a year is how much your water will go up. And we need to know how that's gonna affect our
Yeah.
citizens in Blanding, because we want it to look nice and stay the way it is.
You say $15,000 a year, but that's right now.
That's right now,
Yeah.
right?
I've got to do some expanding, so that's probably gonna be 25,000,
Right.
especially if we expand that whole thing. So, I mean, I don't know.
So my question for you is, how long have you and Melissa been doing the cemetery now?
Since 2012.
So 10 years. Have you done any rate increases over the last 10 years on the tax? Do you know about on tax, not on the plot, but on tax?
Yes, I believe we did once. Did we do one?
One time last 10
Do
years.
one,
Once or
seems
twice.
like the first time I was on the board, we did one right as I was coming off.
And I'm not trying to get out into anything specific. I'm just trying to.
Yeah, I'm thinking at least once, possibly twice. Yeah. Like I say, kind of talking to the wrong person's
Yeah.
finance because my wife does all that.
I know when I worked for Bountiful
Could
City,
you come when we address this policy?
She could. We didn't. I didn't know. I didn't know what was going on tonight, so.
No, you're good. I mean, it would be nice to, I realize we don't want to create a policy for one entity versus others, but they are different than the school district and then the city because they operate on tax dollars.
well, so does the city and the school district though.
No, I mean, but their income is really solely from tax dollars. I mean, the minimal amount that they bring in to bury somebody covers minimal costs, but
Melissa could get all those numbers and bring it.
You know what,
so if we raise our water rate and then our residents get an increase in their property taxes, they don't need that either. So that's what I think we need to consider.
would you
That's my
still like
opinion.
me to bring it back as a business item?
Discussion.
You want another discussion?
Discussion.
Okay, all right, we'll bring it back as another discussion item. If you don't mind, I'm gonna bring it, oh, go ahead.
I have one comment, if I can make it just on the cemetery, just maybe a different way to look at it. The cemetery district is much larger than Blanding's incorporated boundary. And so if we offer a discount on water different than what we're charging, for our own parks, the citizens of Blanding are subsidizing that water for those who live in the cemetery district, but not in city limits. So that might be something to consider too.
So
But that's why they pay our higher fees, correct? Because the county's all paying tax
Well,
on
Higher fees are those out of the
only
district.
Blanding residents pay to Blanding Cemetery District.
No, so you
In
could
the
be.
cemetery district.
What is
It
the
goes to
cemetery
Long
district?
Canyon. It goes to Long Canyon, it goes to White Mesa.
Look down White Mesa, it's a pretty big
So Blanding City residents, if we're subsidizing the water cell, we're subsidizing the water cell for the whole district, not just Blanding City residents.
That's why we need to know what that
Yeah, we
cost
don't.
is.
Yeah.
to us.
So,
the cemetery budgets about 65,000 in property tax collection a year.
what's their
So
total
we're gonna
budget?
take half of that.
Right.
And,
Put it-
Or their total revenue?
We can lose money on it.
cemetery,
Yeah, yeah.
About $100,000.
So their total revenue is about 100,000 a year. So 15,000 would be a 15% increase on the total budget. Here's what I'm gonna do. We'll bring it back as a discussion item. We may need to gather some information. I don't know that it'll be at the second meeting in January, but at the latest, the first meeting in February, we can bring this back.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Everything good? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. Let's move on to our business item, the FBO contract addendum.
Okay, and last but not least, this hopefully will be short and sweet. So remember, a little while ago, we were looking at our hanger rates, thank you, because we're looking at trying to have an ability to fund maintenance and capital costs at the, I was gonna say the cemetery, at the airport, because right now the airport's subsidized in a variety of ways. At that time, we recommended increasing hanger rates to $300 a month, essentially from $100 to $300 a month. After feedback from the aviation community, after feedback from actually the airport committee, the advisory committee that was formed after that discussion, we met with our FBO and said, you know what, we think you guys can make money easier than we could, because you're down there, you're in this business, you know everyone there. And so essentially what this business item is the city saying we want our FBO to also be our management company for the hangars. I did an analysis on it. If you look at page 38, there's a table. Councilman Nielsen, we're talking about airport hangar rates,
Yeah.
the FBO. So page 38 at that table, essentially what we were trying to do when we initially proposed raising the rate to 300 is we were trying to catch up with the fact that the rates have never been raised at the hangars in the last 27 years or so. And what we did is we said to the FBO, hey, why don't you take over our hangar maintenance and our hangar leases? I'm sorry, I said maintenance, but our hangar leases. And what we'll do is we'll cost share. They proposed 50-50. We went through a ton of different proposals, and 50-50 had the largest ROI for the city. And one of the things that they'll do is one of the hangars, and they can do up to 6 hangars as transient hangars, meaning those who are flying in just need a place to rent, and which would be at a much higher rate. Long story short, we would be initially, as a city, we would be taking about a $10,000 loss at least the first year in revenues, but we would recoup those costs based on these numbers within 5 years, and after 5 years we'd actually start making a profit, if not sooner, based on the numbers that we crunched and based on the numbers that the FBO crunched. We took this before the airport committee, and they all were very supportive as a whole of it. They also gave their assessment on the hangar rates for the locals. They all felt that that was a fair amount as well. And what we've done, if you look at these percentages, by year 7, the FBO, because they're going to take over the management of the leasing with tenants, the FBO has to move from $1,000 a year to $1,500 a year. Basically, what we're doing for the first 15 years is we're trying to catch up for the lost inflation over the last 27 years. And then after the last 10 years or so, it's going to level out with inflation is the idea behind it. So I don't know if there's any questions. Our FBO is here. Jason Ney, who's on our airport advisory committees, here as well. I know Councilmember Ewald, even though he declared his conflict of interest, he also is our airport committee liaison, or our airport liaison. Well, I guess technically you have been, but you recommended Councilmember Ewald. Yeah, so you can ask me questions or those.
Shelby, you good with this?
Yeah, I think it'll work out for everybody.
Who's responsible for maintenance?
So just the
I
day-to-day
don't see it in
maintenance,
here.
the day-to-day maintenance so this is an addendum to their contract. So anything in their current contract under $2,000, they take care of. If there's needs over $2,000, then they put in a request to the city. And if we can handle it at that time based on budget, we can do it, or we would have to budget for it in the next budget. So that's basically how it works.
We still have a sander down there that we need to get rid of.
Yeah.
The other thing in this is, so any existing issues that we have with hangar tenants, the city will resolve those currently existing. Any future hangar tenant issues, they will now manage moving forward. And they will also use our existing hangar lease contract. They will also honor our existing waiting list, which by ordinance, it gives priority to locals. So we know that we're taking a risk at the initial loss.
So they will have to continue to follow that ordinance about who gets the hangars.
Yes,
It's an
exactly.
ordinance.
Mhm. Yep, it is ordinance on the priority. And if you see, that's an attachment in their contract.
And just to be clear, so that waiting list, those guys will get prioritized over transient hangars. I'm saying you guys already have one transient hangar, but with the waiting list, because we can have up to 6 transient hangars, or we're not gonna boot our guys off the waiting list.
I think that's
Get the rest of
something
the
that we
city
would leave
transit
to them
hangars.
to work out. But yes, we are asking them to honor that waiting list. But if, one of the requirements of this contract is they've got to meet certain benchmarks. They've got it, so there's an out clause. If they're managing it poorly, or they're just not bringing in the dollars, then we can give them 90-day notice. And so we've given them flexibility they're going to honor the waiting list, but if they need to open a second transient hangar to meet the ROI costs and be profitable, well, then they have the leeway to do that.
But this gives them the ability to do that with 6 hangars.
Up to 6 hangars. Now, do you guys want to speak to the transient hangars? Because I know you guys.
We would have no interest in booting out any locals for a transient hangar. I mean, our customers are locals.
But I wonder if we should lower that from 6. That's my only thought. That was my thought too, is do we want,
Would you be okay if we lowered it to 4?
It doesn't matter to us. We're not gonna make that many.
Yeah, I would say,
today you may not feel that way, but if you're losing money, you may change your mind and want to increase the transient hangars, and that's something I think we need to be careful about.
here's the main thing with the transient hangars, why I wouldn't recommend going any lower than 4. Basically, the transient hangar sales are what's subsidizing our local hangar rates.
Totally agree.
So, now our locals could pay higher hangar rates, but they don't want to. So that's why we figured, in the airport advisory committee, we're all comfortable, and Jason, maybe you can speak to this at the 6 level. So I don't know if you want to speak to that, Jason, and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think any of us had any problems with the 6. I don't see us at any point in time being busy enough where we would need those 6 hangars. So especially with the new hangars that would be built down there. So I don't think anybody on the board had any problems with the 6 number.
I agree. I think up to 6 is probably a good number to leave on there. Just as long as we're not.
But you guys don't have people come to you asking when their turn's gonna come up for a hangar. They come to city council. Unfortunately, now we can send them to you guys, though.
Exactly.
That's a nice thing. But they don't have an elected official. I guess they still do, because there's a 90-day out clause, so.
This contract is on the T hangars. So the Guardian Flight hangar, the not involved in this, and any new hangars that we build, that will be a ground lease, won't be involved in this. They're gonna manage the existing, I think it's 12 or 16 hangars that exist down there that are T hangars.
Yeah, and in the future, if we as a city, which we likely wouldn't, we would ground lease and let others build hangars that meet specifications. But if we decided to build new hangars, then at that time we could talk to the FBO about also managing those at this time and make another addendum to their contract. The other key is they're on a 25-year contract currently, and they're 2 years into it. And so you'll see in the table, instead of 20% and then 20%, 20%, 20%, it's 12%, because that last set is only 3 years, because we wanted the addendum to end the same time as their original contract, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I guess my thought with that was if a hangar opens up and there's someone on the waiting list, you guys then are making a decision, do we accept that person on the waiting list, or do we turn that into a transient hangar? That's where I think there could be some issues, but you think 6 transient hangars? I mean, you're saying you don't need that right now. You don't think you need it right now, but I'm just thinking for the future. I just want to make sure we're not keeping people on that waiting list forever because we're opening transient hangars. That's my concern.
The airport needs more hangars
I
essentially.
totally agree.
We don't really need to be worried about the transit hangar so much. The hangar should be built way before the traffic increase is met for.
To that
more
degree.
transit hangar.
Yeah, and
Well, we hope, but
and that's my thought too.
I just, this is
I
a
don't know.
complaint I've heard through the
It's all-
years, so.
Once there's ground leases and other hangars are being built by other entities, ours is gonna be looked at. Ours will be a second thought, I guess, in comparison to new hangars that are gonna be built.
And I
So,
hope that's all true, but
yeah. But I agree that we have the same discussion. Is 6 too much? Is it not enough? But everybody involved seemed to feel comfortable with 6. And so if the committee was comfortable with 6 and the FBO, I felt comfortable with that.
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying, Cheryl, like people that are on the waiting list that are waiting.
right.
You know, so I understand that people might be upset by that, but I don't think.
If they're
Right,
waiting and
it's-
there's and they decide not to rent it, they use it as a transient hangar instead, we're gonna hear about it. And I guess that's when we'll have to have discussions. If that happens, maybe it won't. I don't know. I just know I've heard that several times over the years since I've been on council, and so.
I know in the current environment, there's almost, I won't say no need for transient hangars, but when it comes up, it's usually because like those guys from Florida fly in their air cams and but then they want to rent every hangar on the airport. You know, they need all of them for, you know, and Guardian clears their hangar out and they put a bunch of them in there and I let them use mine and I know Chris has let them use his. and
But
so-
hopefully as you grow, you will have a need for more transient hangars. I mean, that would be great if you
Yeah.
did. But I just want to be careful on not keeping people on that waiting list forever by opening transient hangars.
Well, I like what Jason just said. When they've had need for more, the guys that have them will say, hey, we'll move our stuff out and you can use ours.
And that was the real thing that I got in this whole process was, and why we finally said, why don't we have our FBO do this? Is it was very clear that there's a very tight-knit community that all have an understanding, and that I think is why we wanted to make sure before we brought this to you, we got thoughts from the Airport Advisory Committee, and if they're comfortable with it, then I'm comfortable with it. So, but if you want to make adjustments, you still can direct us to do that. So.
You know, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm thrilled that we actually have an airport advisory committee. That's been I think a huge step. And that was all really positive. Looking over this, I think the only thing that I'm not real comfortable with is just the wording on the 5-year minimum rate increases, but and this no way reflects towards our FBO. It seems like it would be better to either get rid of the minimum rate or have a cap on there or something.
Well,
That's the only thing that I'm not totally comfortable with.
The intent of the minimum is so that we're catching up with inflation and then we can level out. The reason why we don't put a cap on it is this is the minimum that inflation. So this is based on the 60-year average of about 4% of inflation. So inflation, as you've seen over the last couple of years, has gone up dramatically. So we want them to at least be at the minimum of inflation, but we don't want to cap them because if inflation over the next 2 decades is at 9%, we don't want to cap them because then we're cutting off their feet on being able to create a return on investment. That's
So in the
why.
year 2027, the rental fees will go up to $1,500 a year.
Yeah.
That's the minimum. You guys could choose to do more. That's the minimum. And you have a problem with that?
I think if somebody else, if it wasn't Shelby and Casper doing it, if it was somebody else that, you know, we didn't have that trust with.
Oh, I see what
think
you're
I'd
saying.
I'd be
'Cause
nervous about
they could
that.
go higher.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
just automatically. I see.
Sorry, I don't know.
You know what?
The contract covers also that the rent has to be fair and equitable.
Oh, yeah, we did add, remember that we added that line.
It's sort of that, you know, it can't be outrageous.
Yeah,
You would prefer it say maximum? maybe?
I would say just get rid of the minimum and just put rate increases, but, you know.
Yeah, we don't want it to drop below that. That's why the minimum is
Good
there.
point.
We don't want it to drop below that.
And that was the one thing that myself and a couple of members of the airport board did say that they weren't real comfortable with was that minimum rate increase. Like Chris said, you know, we know Shelby and Casper, you know, we trust them, but just having the fact that it could be increased, and I understand it says fair and equitable on there. But, you know, there's some people in the community that have a lot of money, and so if they come down and say, I'm willing to spend $5,000 a month to rent that T hanger. You know, Shelby would probably need his head examined if he didn't take that. And so we want to make sure that there's not a spot where the general aviation public has been down there for a long time.
And that's why we put the fair and equitable, so someone couldn't just come in and be like, I'll pay.
But if you take out the minimum, it limits what they.
They're gonna build their own, they're not gonna lease T hanger.
I think we're thinking of this backwards, because the minimum says to meet RO, if we took out the minimum, then we would not meet our ROI in 5 years.
No, we're just saying, he's saying that it would then require them to take it to only these rates and nothing else. So they couldn't take it to 1,800 instead of
But then
1,500.
what we're doing is we're cutting them off at their feet. That's what I was saying, because this follows inflation and trying to catch up with inflation and level out with inflation. But if inflation over the next couple decades is significantly more than the 60-year average, then they're not going to make an ROI and the city's not going to make an ROI.
So you want to give them a route just to keep up with inflation.
Exactly.
But you make a valid point. If it's somebody else, you risk them saying, okay, now your hanger rate is 3,600 a
Well,
year.
but that
Which
goes
is what we tried to do. So
that goes to part
It's
of our
very possible.
90-day clause is if we're getting an uproar from all the hangar tenants saying, hey, they're just jacking us and it's not fair. Well, then it's not fair and equitable. And then it's also they're exhibiting some level of poor management, right? And they're not going to want to do that. So I feel comfortable with our 90-day clause and that language and the fair and equitable line, because that gives us room to make argument if they're being unfair and they're just jacking up prices through the roof. And we do a comparable and we say, hey, your hangar prices are twice what this other comparable is, things like that. That we have room for argument, you know. So
I'll leave that to you too, because I agree with you. You need a motion. Or further discussion on the,
Mason,
I
you're
gotta
the
remember.
chair of the advisory board. What's any final thoughts on that?
What number is it?
I'm still not super excited about the no cap on it. I understand the keeping up with inflation. Is there any way we could say, these are the minimums,
to maximum.
10% or maximum inflation or something?
you just
like
gave me an idea. What if we say that the rate increase cannot be more than what the current inflation rate is at that time?
I think that's great. I think that'd be
So
fair.
I think we could accept a motion then with that change.
Let's make sure our FBO is comfortable with that, or maybe we say
That restricts us for making any investments into it on our side of it if we want to upgrade a hangar.
Yes.
We wanna make the facilities nicer, which is what should happen down there.
What if we said that it could not be more than 5% above inflation?
Last.
So there's no room for.
Yeah,
investment on our-
that's what I'm worried about too, is the whole intent of this is trying to find a way where this, A, the city doesn't have to manage it, and B, it's an ROI. Because initially, we as a city are taking a loss. Initially, they're taking an investment. And the problem is, if we have a cap, then we're basically saying we potentially are not going to meet our ROI in those first 5 years to then make it profitable after. And our rates are already so low. But
Well, if you upgrade a hangar, let's say to, standards of, I don't know, where big jets are gonna want to come in and stay in there, then I think you would change that. There would be a small, large and luxury or something. I don't know, it would then change the rates if you upgrade a hangar to that point.
I think that's why the contract talks about the condition of the hangar also. It's fair and equitable based on size and condition of the hangar. I mean, it doesn't leave much room for management.
And we felt like we tackled all these things to create the balance, because the key is, if we're going to do this, we have to make sure we're bringing an ROI soon, because we're going to take a loss initially. And we want to get to that ROI within 5 years and start making it.
Well, we want them to as well.
Well, that's the idea.
how it
It's
all
both the
works,
city
but-
and us, yeah.
But we also don't want our hangar tenants to be upset, so.
So are you guys are you guys saying that if say you've got a tenant that wants a bunch of luxurious upgrades to his hangar and his hangar only, that you'd be willing to do that, but charge him a higher rate? Is that kind of the intent?
I think so, yeah. They go there cleaned up. I mean, everybody complains about the condition, they're not maintained, they're nasty. We go and clean one up, fix it up, make it real nice and just have it presentable and have this something that somebody wants to rent. And I mean,
And it's still fair and equitable, but based off the, the condition of the hangar.
That doesn't break the other hangar
Yeah.
rate, just for that one.
And that's why this is the minimum, but we don't have the cap, because then they can go in and make improvements that gives them justification to maybe charge a higher rate for a specific.
That's a good point.
I mean, with the current rates, there's not gonna be a lot.
Yeah,
So for improvements.
Right now, the transient.
It would have to be a capital expense for you guys, and then you do need to charge more.
Exactly. And right now, the transient hangars are gonna be subsidizing the other ones anyways until we can get this to be profitable.
Yeah. I think with that in mind, at that point, I think I can stand behind the wording on the minimum rate.
Okay, so
You're good
I
with it?
need
I'm good with it. Make a motion.
a motion for the resolution.
Councilmember Grover made a motion.
I
I thought
thought,
Lynn was starting the motion.
Oh,
I was gonna do it, but you.
Go ahead. I said, make your
I
motion.
make a motion that we accept resolution 01-10-2023-3. The resolution approving an amendment to fixed based operator contracts with Freedom Rule Fuels for hangar and other service management.
Seconded.
all right, we have a motion by Councilmember Gasser and a second by Grover. Any discussion on the item? Further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Right, motion passes.
That's good.
Adjourn.
Do we have any need for special?
No, and the mayor asked if there was need that we hold off since he's not here in person today. So,
Okay,
but-
and just were we supposed to put a court judge today?
So part of the update is, he has a 30-day time period. So I'll give a report on that.
Okay,
The mayor has a 30-day time period to decide. He was trying to decide before today's meeting,
Thank you, guys.
but the problem is they only do trainings every quarter. And if he selected one of those that's not already a current judge, they would have had to start their training yesterday, which means we would have had to do a special session last week.
okay.
And so it just wasn't going to be possible either way. So the mayor said, I'm just going to take my full 30 days to make a decision, because no matter what, we're going to have to get an interim judge and send, and if they're not an existing judge, then we'd have to wait till April anyways for the next training.
Oh,
So,
dear. Okay,
but yes, so we're mayor's still kind of processing that. And
He's still on there?
I think he's still driving, so he may be in and out of reception.
okay, so if there's not a special session, I'll take a motion to
I
adjourn.
made it. I'll second it.
Right. It is Grover and Nelson. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Any opposed?
No.
We are adjourned.
Thank you, guys.
You do that well.
You know, so no one got it. Put a break.
That's okay.
I will.
Sure.